This video is going to show how to use test corrections on Delta Math. So test corrections is when you make an assignment where you link the questions on your test to certain skills on Delta Math, and when the students get their test back, they write their points on Delta Math and it creates them a custom assignment to solve. So we'll see a full example. So create test correction. So my test correction, and let's say for periods 2 and 4, and percent back, you could leave a 0 in there, but if we do 50% back, that would mean a student can raise their test score and they'll see their test score going up as they solve it. So if they got an 80, they can get half of the points they lost back. So half of 20 is 10, so they could go from an 80 to a 90 if they got 100% on the assignment. So the link step is when we make the questions. So let's just say question 1 was 20 points. Let's say it's on inequalities. So linear inequalities level 1 is this. So let's say that's what the one was about. Question 2 was about linear inequalities level 2. Question 3 was graphing linear inequalities. Question 4. Now, let's just say question 4 was also linear inequalities level 2. I'm going to show the significance of having two questions with the same skill linked to it. And question 5 was 20 points, and it was identifying a point in the regions of inequalities. So if there was extra credit, you should say here so that the students' points add up. And then we go to skills, and it makes a list of any skill that was on any sort of question. So this will allow you to rearrange the skills if you're interested in having them in a particular order. And you can set for each skill. Now, each of these, the student will only have to do if they got that question wrong, which they are going to tell you when they type it in on the student page, which I'll show in a second. So you don't know whether each student will get these. But you can set individual penalties. Now, for me, for my defaults for corrections, in my class, I usually do 3 questions required for if they messed up a question on their test. But you could do more, especially if it's multiple choice. So, but remember for this one, there was 2 different questions that had to do with it. So question 2 and question 4 each had linear inequalities level 2. So there's this extra thing called add, which means if they got one of the 2 wrong, how many of these types of questions do you want them to solve? 3. But what if they got both questions wrong that had to do with this? How many additional on top of 3 should they do? So 2. So that would mean if they got them both wrong, they'd have to do 5. And if there were 3 skills like it, if they got all 3 wrong, they'd have to do 7. So an extra 2 every question they get wrong after the first one, which was 3. Now, remember, we could set the weight here, but that's a little complicated because you don't even know if this one's going to be in there if they got that one right. But something like this, you could set definitely a couple attempts. And maybe you don't want them to see the example, so we'll just see that when we get there. Okay, so that's it. So let's create the assignment to stay here. Create, and let's go to the student view. Okay. So the student will see my test correction, and they'll have to type in their test grade. So let's say they got a 60 on the test. Now, if they type in that they got 10 wrong on everything, well, that doesn't make any sense. How could they, if they got 10 wrong on 10 off out of 20, they would have a 50 on the test, so it won't let them put it through. So only if it adds up does it let them go through. So they can leave it blank if they got it right. So this would add up because they've lost 40 points. So make sure if you're using this that you actually write how many points the students lost on each question, like a kind of a minus situation, so they know what numbers to type in. And then you press initialize, and then it creates the assignment for them. So my test correction here is these are the 3 problems that had anything to do with that. So if you remember, level 1 had something like this. If they get it wrong, they can see their answer. It gives them a little bit of feedback here. Level 2 was the one that said it was 3 required, but if they got them both wrong, and they did, according to how we typed the points, then they'd be required for 5. But actually, I think for this one, we also said one of these. So just to show this thing right here, if they add 7 across, they would get -7 and then a positive x. They would have to shade down and the line would be solid. So they can see, if they get the question right, that now they're 11% complete, but their new test is 62. This is their new and improved test grade. So they can see this go all the way up to 80% because we said that their score could be 50%. So if we go back to the teacher page, if we look at the test correction, we can see their new test score, we can see their completion, we can see how many points they lost on each, and they didn't lose any points on here. We can go here, we can see that it took them 25 seconds. So that sums up test corrections.